15 of the country's top doctors stood frozen in a sterile hospital room, watching a billionaire's life slip away. They'd tried everything, every procedure, every medication, every desperate measure known to modern medicine. Nothing worked. Then a 12-year-old black boy in a worn gray hoodie walked through those emergency room doors, and everything changed. What happened next would expose a truth so uncomfortable, so deeply rooted in prejudice, that it would shake that hospital and everyone watching to its core. Because sometimes the person who holds the answer isn't the one you expect. And sometimes the biggest barrier to saving a life isn't medical. It's the color of someone's skin.
Marcus Williams never imagined his Tuesday night shift would become the longest night of his life. At 46 years old, Marcus had worked security at St. Catherine's Medical Center for nearly 2 decades. He knew every hallway, every exit, every quirk of the old heating system that made the 3rd floor sound haunted after midnight. He wore his Navy uniform with quiet pride. Not because security work made him rich or famous, but because it meant something. It meant he could provide for his son, Elijah. Elijah was 12, brilliant, and curious about everything. While other kids his age obsessed over video games and social media, Elijah devoured medical journals Marcus brought home from the hospital's recycling bins. The boy would sit at their small kitchen table, reading about surgical procedures and pharmaceutical compounds, his eyes lighting up with questions Marcus couldn't always answer. "One day, Dad," Elijah would say, looking up from a page about cardiac surgery, "I'm going to be a doctor, a real one." Marcus never doubted him. His son had something special, a mind that could see patterns others missed, a gentleness in his spirit that made even strangers trust him. Teachers called him gifted. Marcus just called him his miracle. That Tuesday started like any other. Marcus kissed Elijah goodbye that morning before school, reminded him to finish his homework, and headed to work for the evening shift. St. Catherine's was one of the city's premier hospitals, the kind of place where senators came for their heart surgeries, where celebrities checked in under fake names, where money could buy you the best medical care in the country. Marcus had long since made peace with the irony. He protected the wealthy and privileged, ensuring their safety, while knowing he could never afford the level of care they received. His health insurance barely covered basics. One serious illness could bankrupt his family. But he didn't dwell on it. He had a job to do. The evening shift was usually quiet until around 8 p.m., when the emergency room started filling up. Marcus made his rounds, nodding to familiar nurses, checking doors, watching monitors. He developed a sixth sense over the years, an ability to spot trouble before it fully materialized, a certain tension in someone's shoulders, a suspicious glance, the wrong kind of urgency. At 7:47 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from Elijah. "Dad, can I come visit you at work tonight? I finished all my homework, and Mrs. Chen said she'd drop me off." Marcus hesitated. The hospital wasn't technically a place for kids to hang around, but Elijah loved it there. He'd light up watching the doctors move through the halls, studying their confident strides, imagining himself in their white coats someday. "Okay," Marcus texted back, "but stay in the security office. Don't wander." "Promise! See you soon." Marcus smiled, pocketing his phone. His son's enthusiasm was infectious. He had no way of knowing that in less than 2 hours, Elijah would be the center of a crisis that would force everyone in that hospital to confront their deepest assumptions. He didn't know that his quiet, brilliant son would become the target of rage, suspicion, and prejudice that ran so deep it would nearly cost a man his life. All Marcus knew was that his boy was coming to visit, and that made an ordinary Tuesday night feel a little brighter. At 8:23 p.m., the emergency room doors burst open. Paramedics rushed in, surrounding a gurney. Marcus moved closer, his training kicking in. He caught fragments of urgent conversation. Billionaire tech CEO. Mysterious collapse. Vitals crashing. The hospital erupted into controlled chaos. Doctors appeared from every direction. Specialists were being called in. The most advanced equipment was being wheeled toward the trauma bay. Marcus returned to his post, but something felt different. There was an electric tension in the air, a sense that whatever was happening behind those emergency room doors was far from ordinary. He checked his watch. Elijah would arrive any minute. He had no idea that his two worlds, his role as hospital security and his love for his son, were about to collide in the most devastating way possible. Marcus Williams was tending over his security monitors when he was pulled into a world of unimaginable chaos, prejudice, and mistrust. A Mr. Bernhardt collapsed, and everything he knew suddenly upended. He was told, "Do nothing." But then he got the message, the job was up to him. Without thinking twice, he grabbed a keycard, ran to the helipad, and got to work. But then he was canceled again until he was told the job was back on.
Robert Caldwell was dying, and nobody could figure out why. The 62-year-old tech billionaire, worth an estimated $4.7 billion, had collapsed during a charity gala dinner. One moment, he was giving a speech about innovation and philanthropy. The next, he was on the floor, convulsing, his face turning an unnatural shade of gray. Now he lay in St. Catherine's emergency trauma bay, surrounded by the best medical minds money could summon. Dr. Helena Marsh, Chief of Emergency Medicine. Dr. Raymond Torres, a renowned toxicologist flown in from Boston. Dr. Sarah Chen, a neurologist who'd written textbooks. Cardiologists, immunologists, intensive care specialists. 15 doctors in total, each with decades of experience, each with prestigious degrees and publications and awards. And none of them could save him. "His blood pressure keeps dropping," a nurse called out, her voice tight with stress. "I'm seeing elevated troponin levels, but the EKG doesn't match a typical MI," Dr. Torres said, studying the monitors with furrowed concentration. "Could be an autoimmune response," Dr. Chen suggested, "something triggering a cytokine storm?" "We've tried immunosuppressants, no change." "What about his tox screen?" "Clean. No common poisons, no drug interactions." Dr. Marsh stood at the center of the chaos, her face pale beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. She'd been a doctor for 28 years and never felt so helpless. Every protocol they'd tried had failed. Every medication had been ineffective. It was as if Caldwell's body was shutting down from some invisible cause they couldn't identify. "Get his family on the phone," Dr. Marsh ordered, "and someone call legal. If we can't stabilize him in the next hour—" She didn't finish the sentence. Everyone knew what happened when billionaires died in your hospital. Lawsuits, investigations, careers destroyed. Outside the trauma bay, Marcus stood at his post near the emergency room entrance. Elijah had arrived 20 minutes ago, and despite Marcus's instructions to stay in the security office, the boy had wandered out, drawn by the unusual commotion. "Dad, what's happening?" Elijah asked, his eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. "Some kind of medical emergency. Important patient. The doctors have it under control." But even as Marcus said it, he could see the strain on the faces of medical staff rushing past. This wasn't controlled. This was barely contained panic. Elijah watched the flurry of activity with intense focus. Even at 12, he could read the situation. "They don't know what's wrong with him, do they?" Marcus put a hand on his son's shoulder. "That's not our concern, buddy. Come on, let's—" "Code Blue! Code Blue in Trauma 1!" Alarms shrieked. Doctors sprinted. The controlled panic became open crisis. Through the briefly opened trauma bay doors, Elijah caught a glimpse of the patient. A middle-aged white man, his body jerking with convulsions, machines screaming warnings, doctors frantically working over him. And Elijah saw something. His eyes narrowed. He took a step forward. "Elijah!" "No." Marcus reached for his son, but the boy had already moved closer to the trauma bay entrance, standing on his toes to see through the small window in the door. The convulsions, the gray pallor, the pattern of symptoms the doctors were shouting about. Elijah's mind raced through everything he'd read in those medical journals. Hundreds of hours of study, connecting dots, seeing patterns. He'd read about a case just last month, a rare condition, almost never diagnosed correctly because the symptoms mimicked so many other emergencies. "I think I know what's wrong with him," Elijah said quietly. Marcus didn't hear him at first over the noise. "Dad?" Elijah's voice was stronger now. "Dad, I think I know what's wrong with that patient." Marcus looked down at his son, saw the seriousness in his eyes, and felt his heart sink. "Elijah, this isn't the time." "It's Addisonian crisis, secondary adrenal insufficiency triggered by acute stress." Marcus blinked. "What?" "The symptoms match exactly. If he collapsed during a stressful event and they're not responding to normal cardiac protocols—" Elijah was speaking faster now, excitement and urgency mixing in his young voice. "Dad, they need to give him hydrocortisone, high-dose IV corticosteroids. If they don't, he'll die." For a moment, Marcus just stared at his son. Elijah had been reading medical journals, yes, but this? Diagnosing a patient 15 doctors couldn't figure out? "Son, you can't just— These are professional doctors. They know what they're doing." "But what if they don't? What if they're missing it?" Through the window, Marcus could see Dr. Marsh shouting orders, her face twisted with frustration and fear. The patient was crashing. Whatever they were doing wasn't working. "Please, Dad, just tell them to consider it. That's all. Just consider adrenal crisis." Marcus felt torn between protecting his son from disappointment and— what if Elijah was right? What if his brilliant, strange, wonderful boy had actually seen something these experienced doctors had missed? "Okay," Marcus said finally. "Stay here." He approached the trauma bay doors and caught the attention of a nurse rushing out. "Excuse me, I know this might sound strange, but has anyone considered adrenal insufficiency?" The nurse barely glanced at him. "Sir, please step back. This is a restricted area." "I understand, but—" "Security needs to maintain the perimeter. Please." Marcus tried again, stepping closer to where Dr. Marsh was visible through the door window. "Dr. Marsh, has anyone checked for Addisonian crisis?" This time, Dr. Marsh heard him. She looked up, her face flushed with stress and anger, and saw Marcus, a security guard, calling out medical suggestions during the most critical case of her career. Her expression turned to ice. She stormed toward the door, yanked it open, and stepped into the hallway. "What did you just say?" Marcus swallowed. "I just thought someone suggested checking for adrenal insufficiency. Secondary adrenal crisis. It might—" "Someone suggested?" Dr. Marsh's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "Who? You?" My son, actually. He's been studying." Dr. Marsh's eyes found Elijah, standing a few feet behind Marcus, in his gray hoodie, looking small and young and undeniably black in a hospital where most doctors and administrators were white. Her face transformed. Stress became rage. Frustration became contempt. "Are you kidding me?" Her voice rose, drawing the attention of other staff members. "Your son, your 12-year-old son, thinks he can diagnose a patient that 15 board-certified physicians are working on? I didn't mean to—" "Get him out of here!" Dr. Marsh pointed at Elijah, her finger shaking with fury. Get that child away from my emergency room before I have both of you arrested for interfering with medical care." Other doctors had emerged from the trauma bay now, drawn by the commotion. Security guards, Marcus's colleagues, approached, unsure what to do. Elijah stepped forward, his voice small but steady. "Ma'am, I just thought—" "I don't care what you thought." Dr. Marsh advanced on the boy, her face contorted with stress and prejudice and fear, all twisted together into something ugly. "This is a hospital, not a playground. We don't need advice from children who've read a few books and think they understand medicine." She turned to Marcus. "This is why we have rules about family members in restricted areas. This is exactly why. Your son has no business being anywhere near this emergency room, and if you don't remove him immediately, I will call the police and have you both escorted from the building." The crowd of medical staff and patients in the ER waiting area had stopped to watch. All of them white, all of them staring at the black security guard and his son being publicly humiliated and accused. Marcus felt shame burn through him, not for his son, but for the situation he'd put Elijah in. He should have known better. He should have protected his boy from this. "We're leaving," Marcus said quietly, putting his arm around Elijah. "I apologize for the disruption. You should apologize, and you should teach your son that medical expertise isn't something you get from reading magazines in your spare time. People's lives are at stake here." She turned back to the trauma bay, her white coat billowing behind her like a cape of righteous authority. Marcus guided Elijah toward the exit, feeling the weight of every stare, hearing the whispered conversations starting up in their wake. Elijah was trembling, not crying, but vibrating with suppressed emotion. Anger, hurt, humiliation. "Dad, what if I'm right? What if they die because they won't listen?" Marcus had no answer. Behind them, through the still open trauma bay doors, alarms continued to...
They made it to the parking lot before Elijah broke down. Not crying, Elijah rarely cried, but his hands were shaking, his breathing fast and shallow, his eyes bright with unshed tears of rage and helplessness. "She didn't even listen," he said, his voice cracking. "She didn't even consider it. She just saw me and decided I was stupid." Marcus pulled his son close, feeling his heart shatter. "I know, buddy. I know. Because I'm black, right?" Elijah looked up at his father. "That's why. If I was white, if I was wearing a suit instead of a hoodie, she would have at least thought about what I said." Marcus wanted to deny it, wanted to protect his son from that truth for just a little longer. But Elijah was 12, not 5. He understood the world he lived in. Yeah, that's probably part of it. It's not fair." Elijah's voice was small now, all the confidence and brilliance drained out of it. "I was trying to help. I was trying to save someone's life, and she treated me like I was nothing." Inside, Marcus was screaming. This was the moment every black parent dreaded, when your child's innocence dies, when they learn that no matter how smart they are, no matter how hard they work, some people will only ever see their skin color first. "Listen to me," Marcus said, turning Elijah to face him. "What just happened in there, that's on her, not you. You were brilliant. You saw something 15 doctors missed. You tried to help. You did everything right." "But he's going to die now, isn't he?" Elijah's voice broke. "Because she wouldn't listen to me, that man is going to die." Marcus didn't know what to say to that. His phone buzzed. A text from his supervisor. "What the hell happened? Dr. Marsh wants you suspended pending investigation." Marcus stared at the message, feeling numb. 20 years of loyal service, and one moment of stepping out of his place was about to cost him his job. He looked at his son, this brilliant, beautiful boy who just learned the cruelest lesson of all, that in America, being right wasn't enough if you were black, that your intelligence meant nothing if people refused to see past their prejudices,
that you could hold the answer to saving someone's life, and they would rather let that person die than admit that you might know something they didn't. "Come on," Marcus said softly. "Let's go home." They had walked maybe 10 steps when they heard it. A sound that cut through the night air like a knife. The long, continuous tone of a flatline alarm, audible even through the hospital's walls and windows. Robert Caldwell had just died. Elijah stopped walking. His whole body went rigid. "Dad!" "I know. I could have saved him." "I know, son. I know." For several long moments, they just stood there in the parking lot, a father and son, carrying the weight of a death that didn't have to happen, of prejudice that killed as surely as any disease. Then, something shifted in Elijah's face. The hurt transformed into something harder. Determination. "I'm going to become a doctor anyway," he said, his voice steady now. "I'm going to be so good, so brilliant, that they can't ignore me. I'm going to save lives whether they want me to or not." Marcus felt pride and heartbreak war inside his chest. "I know you will. And you know what else?" Elijah looked up at his father. "I'm going to make sure that other kids like me, other black kids who are smart and want to help people, I'm going to make sure they get listened to too. I'm going to change things." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. They didn't know yet that they were wrong about one critical thing. They didn't know that Robert Caldwell hadn't actually died, that the medical team had managed to resuscitate him at the last possible second. They didn't know that Dr. Helena Marsh, in her desperation during those final moments, had finally considered every possibility, including the one a 12-year-old boy had suggested. They didn't know that she'd ordered the high-dose hydrocortisone, almost as an afterthought, expecting it to do nothing. They didn't know that within 30 seconds of that injection, Robert Caldwell's vitals had begun to stabilize. They didn't know that Elijah had been exactly, perfectly, brilliantly right. All they knew was that they'd tried to help, been rejected, humiliated, and dismissed. All they knew was that racism had won again. All they knew was the ache of injustice and the lonely walk back to their car under the harsh glow of parking lot lights. But the night wasn't over yet. And the truth, the uncomfortable, undeniable truth, was about to force its way into the light, whether Dr. Helena Marsh was ready for it or not.
Dr. Helena Marsh stood in the trauma bay at 11:47 p.m., staring at Robert Caldwell's stable vital signs, and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. He was alive. Against all odds, against all expectations, the billionaire was breathing steadily, his color returning, his body finally responding to treatment. Because of the hydrocortisone. Because a 12-year-old black boy in a gray hoodie had been right. The other doctors were celebrating, relieved, already crafting the narrative of their brilliant last-minute diagnosis. But Dr. Marsh couldn't join them. She kept seeing Elijah's face, his small frame, the way he'd trembled when she'd shouted at him, the way she'd refused to even consider what he'd said, because he was 12 and black and wearing a hoodie in her emergency room. "Helena?" Dr. Torres touched her shoulder. "You okay? We saved him." "We almost didn't," she said quietly. Dr. Chen approached with Caldwell's chart. "The adrenal crisis diagnosis was brilliant. I'm embarrassed we didn't think of it sooner. It's rare, but the presentation was textbook once you knew what to look for." Dr. Marsh's hands were shaking. "I didn't diagnose it." "What?" "The security guard's son. The boy I kicked out. He suggested adrenal crisis over an hour ago. I dismissed him. I humiliated him. I almost let this patient die because I refused to listen to a child." The room went quiet. "You can't blame yourself," Dr. Torres said, but his voice was uncertain. "He's not a doctor. He's a kid." He was right. A 12-year-old boy saw what 15 board-certified physicians missed, and I was so angry, so stressed, so...
She couldn't finish. So prejudiced, so blinded by my own assumptions about who deserves to be heard. Dr. Marsh left the trauma bay and walked through the emergency room, past the nurse's station, toward the security office. She found Marcus's supervisor. The security guard and his son who were here earlier, I need their contact information. Marcus Williams? He's probably home by now. He left pretty upset. Dr. Marsh, about the incident. There's no incident, she interrupted. There's just me needing to apologize. She got Marcus's number and stood in the hallway, her phone heavy in her hand. What did you say to someone whose child you'd publicly humiliated, whose valid medical insight you'd rejected because of prejudice you didn't even realize you had? She called. It rang 4 times before Marcus answered, his voice cautious. Mr. Williams, this is Dr. Helena Marsh. I'm calling because your son was right. Robert Caldwell is alive because of your son. The hydrocortisone worked. It was adrenal crisis, exactly like Elijah said. Silence on the other end. I need you to understand that I'm not calling to make myself feel better. I'm calling because what I did tonight was inexcusable. I treated your son with contempt. I dismissed his intelligence. I let my stress and my prejudices blind me to the truth, and I nearly cost a man his life because of it. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. You did. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I'm sorry. Your son is remarkable. He saw what I couldn't, and he deserves better than what he got from me tonight. Another pause. Then, can I speak with him? With Elijah? Marcus called his son to the phone. I heard him say, "It's the doctor from the hospital. She wants to talk to you." Hello? Elijah's voice was small, guarded. Elijah, my name is Dr. Marsh. I'm the doctor who yelled at you tonight. I'm calling to tell you that you were absolutely, completely right. Mr. Caldwell is alive because of you. You saved his life. She heard the sharp intake of breath on the other end. You have a gift, a real gift for medicine. And I want you to know that what happened tonight, the way I treated you, that wasn't about you. That was about my own failures, my own blindness. You did everything right. Really? Elijah's voice cracked. Really? And I'm going to do something else too. I'm going to make sure this story gets told. I'm going to tell every doctor, every medical student, every person who walks through this hospital about the 12-year-old who saved a billionaire's life. Because the world needs to know that genius and wisdom can come from anywhere, from anyone, regardless of age, race, or what they're wearing. She paused. If you still want to be a doctor someday, I'd be honored to help you, to mentor you, to make sure that what happened tonight never happens to you again. Elijah was crying now. She could hear it. Thank you. No, Dr. Marsh said softly. Thank you. You reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place, to save lives, not to protect my ego. When the call ended, Dr. Marsh stood alone in the hospital hallway, feeling the weight of what had happened. One boy, one moment, one choice to either listen or dismiss. She'd chosen wrong at first, but she could choose differently going forward. 3 weeks later, St. Catherine's Medical Center held a ceremony. Robert Caldwell, recovered and healthy, stood at a podium and told the story of the 12-year-old boy who'd saved his life. Elijah stood beside him, wearing not a gray hoodie, but a crisp button-down shirt, smiling shyly as cameras flashed. Dr. Marsh announced a new scholarship fund in Elijah's name, full tuition for underprivileged students pursuing medical degrees, with a special focus on students of color. And Marcus Williams watched his son shine, thinking about all the other Elijahs out there,
All the brilliant minds dismissed because of their age or race or circumstances. All the potential being wasted because people refused to listen. The fight wasn't over. Racism wouldn't disappear because of one good news story. But something had shifted. A crack had formed in the armor of prejudice. And light was getting through.